Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment, because what you're about to hear will touch your heart and remind you that kindness can come from the most unexpected places. It was raining that evening, the kind of cold drizzle that makes the city look gray and lonely. A little girl, no older than 7, stood barefoot at the edge of a wide marble driveway, her small hands trembling as she clutched her younger brother close. Her eyes were red from crying, her voice barely a whisper as she looked up at the tall, angry man blocking their way. "Please, don't hurt us," she said, her voice breaking like glass. That one sentence stopped him cold. He'd been furious just moments before, furious enough to raise his voice, maybe even his hand, but those words, that tiny voice, hit him harder than any punch ever could. The girl's name was Ella, and she had no idea that in the next 60 seconds, everything in her life would change. Because at that very moment, a sleek black car pulled up to the gates, and her millionaire father, Jonathan Hale, stepped out. Jonathan wasn't the kind of man people saw and forgot. Tall, sharp-featured, dressed in a tailored navy suit, he had the quiet authority of someone used to getting what he wanted. But the moment he saw his daughter crying on the driveway, clutching her little brother, all that calm, commanding presence shattered. He didn't even notice the raindrops soaking his expensive coat, he just ran. "Ella! Tommy," he called, his voice shaking. The guard who had been yelling at them immediately froze, realizing who the children belonged to. But Jonathan didn't care about that. He knelt down in the mud, wrapped his arms around his children, and felt the smallest heartbeat trembling against his chest. "Who touched you? What happened?" His tone was low but dangerous, the kind that made grown men shiver. Ella sobbed, unable to explain. It had been such a long, terrifying evening. The new housekeeper had locked them out after a misunderstanding. She'd thought the kids were being rude. The guard had yelled at them for playing near the gates. And their father had been late, again. Jonathan carried them inside, ignoring everyone's stares. Inside the mansion's golden light, everything looked expensive but empty. He sat on the staircase, holding his children tight. "I'm so sorry, baby," he whispered. "I should have been here sooner." It wasn't the first time he'd said that. Since his wife died 2 years ago, Jonathan had buried himself in work. He built companies, bought properties, attended charity galas, but at night, when he came home to this silent mansion, there were only 2 small rooms with drawings taped to the wall that reminded him of what truly mattered. Ella looked up at him through her tears. "We just wanted to wait for you outside." The rain wasn't scary until he started shouting. That broke him. He looked toward the door, where the guard stood trembling, and said quietly, "You're fired." But the anger faded quickly, replaced by something else. A realization that maybe he wasn't just punishing others for being cruel, he'd been cruel too, in a quieter way, by not being there. That night, Jonathan did something he hadn't done in years. He cooked. Burned toast, undercooked eggs, but it didn't matter. Ella and Tommy laughed until they forgot why they'd been scared. He tucked them in, sat beside their beds, and watched them sleep. For the first time in months, he didn't check his phone. He just stayed, listening to the sound of their breathing and the rain outside. But deep down, Jonathan knew one night wasn't enough. He had to change. The next morning, he canceled all his meetings. His assistant panicked, the investors called non-stop, but Jonathan ignored them all. He drove his kids to the park, the one his wife used to love. There, beneath the tall oak trees, he told them a story about their mom, how she used to laugh even when life hurt, how she believed in second chances. Ella looked up at him and said softly, "Mommy would be happy you're home now." Jonathan felt tears burn his eyes, but he smiled. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick. "She would." From that day on, everything changed. The mansion was filled with laughter again, paint on the walls, messy toys in the halls, cookies baking in the kitchen. Jonathan didn't just become a present father, he became the kind of man his children could run to, not hide from. And every time it rained, Ella would press her face to the window and whisper, "See, Daddy? The rain isn't scary anymore." Years later, when Ella grew up, she told that story on stage at her graduation. She said, "The day I said, 'Please don't hurt us,' I didn't just save myself, I saved my dad too." The crowd went silent, and Jonathan, older now, with gray at his temples, wiped a tear from his cheek. Because she was right. That day didn't just change their lives, it reminded him that love is something you fight for, not buy. So if you've ever felt too busy, too far gone, or too broken to fix things, remember Jonathan and Ella. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of fear, one small voice, to remind you what truly matters. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, because somewhere out there, another little voice is waiting to be heard. Red Heart.